Michael and Chucky too. Slash-a-Holics unite, this one's for you. Calling all Slash-a-Holics, come and dive in. Out of brick terror where the nightmares spin. Every mask and blade, every scream, every fight. Calling all Slash-a-Holics, stay up all night.
Murder Report, an original novel by James Acosta. Chapter 8. Well, the last few murders were interesting to say the least. If you think so, Carol thought to herself. I realized that 2 of them involved crushing someone to death, and I started to feel like that wasn't very original, so this next kill, I wanted it to be somewhat unique. I wanted to put a twist on how I would do it next. Joe was interrupted briefly as Sam made his way back in. He already started eating his banana, and he handed Carol a sandwich and a bottle of water. Joe seemed a little offended by the interruption, but he continued. Glad to see that you both got your snacks, and good thing this part of my story won't be as gross. Well, as I was saying, I wanted this next murder to be thrilling. However, I was having a few issues. First one was that my urge to murder wasn't with me at the moment. It had only been about 2 months since my last murder. Another issue was I didn't know how I wanted to go about it. It was like my mind had hit a dead end. Similar to an author having writer's block. Also, for the first time ever, I was now more paranoid about getting caught than I ever felt. What I decided to do was just take my time and wait for when the moment was right. What I decided to do was just take my time and wait for my mind to unwind, to take my mind off of it. I would play a lot of chess with my servants. Unfortunately for me, they didn't know how to play very well. I eventually taught them. It was then that they started to learn to beat me all the time. After a while, that got boring, and so I wanted to take on marijuana. I was a guy who was rich and retired. I was just absolutely bored out of my mind, and I figured why not see what the buzz was all about. After all, the state of California had barely legalized it a couple of years ago. I bought my nearby island, not too far from California shores. One day I decided to take a trip in my helicopter to LA. It was about a 45-minute trip there from my home before my helicopter finally landed on top of a helipad on the top of one LA's many motel roofs. It wasn't too long until I found myself in a legal weed dispensary. I ended up buying all sorts of things. I paid the guy working at the counter a little hush money, and he let me have more than I was allowed to take home with me. When I finished shopping, I made my way back home. When I made it back, I was excited as hell to try all the weed out. This was the first time I have ever tried weed, as it really had a big impact on me. It had me laughing my ass off. Not much longer, I got really hungry. I ended up pigging out on a lot of junk food, and I was very thirsty as well. After all this experimenting with weed for the next 2 months, I developed a little habit. During this time, however, things started happening to me. Things seemed fine at first. You see, I was too high most of the time to even notice anything unusual or strange happening. That wasn't the same for my servants. They witnessed things occurred that were unexplainable. Things like doors slamming shut all on their own. My drinks would move from one spot to another. You see, when that happened, I figured it was just me misplacing it here and there. Things would just float around and be thrown against the wall. I was also drowsy from the weed as well. So the times I actually saw this happen, I just figured that I was just too tired and seeing things that weren't actually happening. After 2 months or even 3, I soon realized that my servants were quitting one by one. It didn't seem to matter just how much cash I offered them. They refused to stay at my mansion and work for me anymore. Most of them just up and left on me. I was still so stoned most of the time that I either didn't care or I wasn't really paying attention. When any of them would come up to tell me they quit, I would just laugh in their face. This was all because of the side effects from the weed, of course, which was messing me up very badly. One day, the very last servant walked out on me. I was stoned off my mind, sitting in my leather recliner listening to some classical music, and she came right up to me and shoved a letter right into my face. It got my attention right away. I read it to myself. Your house is not safe anymore. It is so damn haunted, and you have been too damn high to even notice a damn thing going on. All of your house staff has quit. We don't want to deal with ghosts anymore. We were tired of getting our hair pulled at night while we tried to sleep, food being thrown all over the place, drinks being poured on the floor, and seeing ghosts at the foot of our beds at night. Good luck trying to clean this whole place on your own. We are done. Your house servants. She spat in my face, gave me a dirty look, and left. The letter sobered me up a little. I guess too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, too. At that point, I quit the weed. It was just making me too paranoid. After all, I was starting to think something was watching me at night. With all my entire house servants gone, it was just me. One night, I made myself some soup. Before I could even get my first spoonful, the bowl slid away from me. When I tried grabbing it back, it floated in the air for a few seconds and flew right at me. The hot soup landed on my face and burned me badly. At night, I had terrible dreams. I dealt with being haunted during the day. It wasn't long before I started to think that my victims were haunting me. They finally came back for vengeance and were going to get that revenge any way that they could. Even though I was now being haunted by my murder victims, the urge for me to murder still hadn't gone away. I don't think anything would have ever satisfied that urge because it grew with me after each day passed. A few weeks went by and that urge went into full swing. It was time for me to make plans for my next murder. As I said before, I wanted my next murder to be unlike all the rest, so I started to think of how I wanted to do it. It came to me one day as I was cleaning around my mansion. You see, I never actually called an exterminator to my island to do any type of routine insect sprays in order to keep the pests away. Because of this, I would find the occasional insect or spider here and there. During my time cleaning around my front door outside, I found a big black widow resting in a huge web a couple of feet away from my door. As soon as I'd seen it, I started to have ideas on how I could use it for my next murder. The wheels in my head turned yet again. Not before long, I had my next plan. I decided that I would hop onto my computer and do some research. However, the moment I sat in my chair and turned on my computer, the power went out throughout my home. This was a common occurrence because those damn ghosts messed with the power almost daily. It was almost as if they knew what I was planning. This was getting rather annoying, so I then made yet another trip out to LA with my laptop. I figured heading to the LA library would be best, as they had free Wi-Fi as well. When I finally made it there, I looked up group therapy for people who had particular fears and phobias. I figured I'd join one of those groups and pretend I had one myself. I would get a feel for what everyone else was afraid of. The fear I was looking for was arachnophobia, or the fear of spiders. I never feared them myself, but the next victim would die somehow spider-related. The idea of this brought me such glee. This process wasn't easy, though. This took a long time. I ended up staying at the motel in LA for about 2 whole months before I finally found someone. I was going to various different support groups for phobias. After all that time, I found a man by the name of Paul. I found out that Paul had a big fear of spiders and choking on his food. Out of everyone else's, it was Paul's fears that piqued my interest. Paul talked about how he had a really bad experience with a spider one day as a kid. His older brother happened to catch one and then put it in a jar. His older brother walked up to Paul as he was eating lunch one day at the kitchen table. He opened up the jar and dumped the spider right into his plate as he was eating food. It ended up scaring Paul so bad that he ended up choking on his food immediately. Afterwards, his mother had to rush to the kitchen and perform the Heimlich maneuver to save his life. When I heard him going into all this, my mind was swirling with ideas on how I could somehow use that to my advantage. The trick was I was going to have to convince him somehow, just like all the others, to come back to my mansion. The other problem was how long could I keep him there before the damn ghost interfered with my plotting. I guessed I'd have to make my move quick if I got him there. When I was in this group, I had to play the part that I had a fear of as well, so I pretended that I was afraid of water, and that drowning was my worst fear. I played my part very well. The group met about once a week. It was about the 4th week when I finally decided to start talking to Paul. It was easy. Usually everyone would leave right away when the group ended. However, Paul always volunteered to put the chairs away after the group meetings were over. I decided to help him out one day after the group meeting. I sparked a conversation with him about our fears. Like all the rest, I also convinced him to come back with me to my mansion. I told him that I was an experienced therapist and that I could offer him even better therapy results than he could ever get from any group therapy sessions. I was surprised that he actually believed me. Either I was a very good actor or he was just that gullible. I gained his trust very easily and told him to meet me at the local pet store the very next day, because that was when this therapy session was going to start. He was very confused at first, but agreed. Later that night, I went online at the motel room and looked up where I could meet someone to buy something. That would be considered very unusual. Luckily, I found a guy who had just what I was looking for, a small number of black widow spiders. The seller didn't ask questions when I showed up to buy them. They were all placed inside a very big mason jar. I paid the guy about $30 and then made my way back to my room. I placed the mason jar inside a big paper bag. I didn't want my next victim to know what I was planning on bringing back with us. The next morning I packed everything up carefully into a big duffel bag and I checked out of the hotel room and hailed a taxi. And I was off to the pet shop. I showed up at the appointed time to meet Paul. He was standing right outside the pet shop looking nervous. I told the cab driver to wait and I stepped out of the cab and met with Paul. He tried to ask me what we were doing there and I told him that he would soon find out. We both went inside and we walked over to a large case containing spiders and other insects. Paul started to freak out a little when he saw them. He freaked out even more when he soon realized that I was going to buy 2 giant tarantulas. He asked me why I was purchasing them. I assured him this was going to be a part of his therapy. He nodded a little nervously and we soon left the store. The next stop we made was a small hardware store. While he waited outside, I went in and bought 2 pairs of Kevlar gloves and 1 thick welder's apron. Once I exited the store, we both hopped back into the cab and headed back to my helicopter. I explained to him that we were heading back to my home. As soon as we got there, I would start this therapy session. When we finally arrived at the chopper, I made sure to have him hop in first. I made sure to lug my duffel bag onto the chopper very delicately. I also made sure to load up his own luggage as well. He had just enough clothes for the weekend. Once we both were packed and ready to go, we took off in the helicopter. He was pretty amazed at the fact that I knew how to fly one. We had a long conversation as we made our way back to my home. It took about 2 hours for us to make it back. When we finally arrived, I landed the helicopter and we both headed inside. I gave Paul a big tour of my mansion. I showed him everything that it had to offer. Needless to say, he was impressed. After an hour of giving him a tour, I offered to have him come to my bar for a couple of drinks. He gladly accepted my offer, and I had him get drunk off his ass. It was only Friday night. I planned on killing him on Sunday, so I figured that I would let him have fun first. Joe gave an honest attempt at an innocent shrug. This gained no reaction from Carol or Sam. Joe continued, though he felt really awkward. I mean, if you think about it, I was only giving him a really short weekend left to live. When Paul was finally hammered at the bar, he was knocking back Jaeger and vodka shots straight with no chasers. I suppose it's worth mentioning that I had every single brand of whiskey you could think of, just in case one of my potential victims should ever ask for one. This always came in handy in times like these. When Paul was drunker than a skunk, he just wouldn't shut the hell up. He also kept on bitching and crying about how he hates spiders and everything about them. I didn't mind at first. However, he just droned on and on about it. I chose to remain somewhat tipsy rather than being drunk like Paul. After about a half an hour of all this yada yada, I finally had enough. I carefully escorted Paul to one of the many guest rooms that I had. I should mention that these aren't your basic guest rooms. Each guest room consists of the same thing. They all have the same lavish king-size bed with wonderful comforters, and each bathroom had relaxing jet jacuzzis with the fancy schmancy towels and hand towels. So you could say that each victim up till now had it pretty good before I ruthlessly ended their lives. Anyways, that is neither here nor there. I just wanted you to know that little fun fact of mine. Carol rolled her eyes. That's fine and all. Don't take too long to do that because that candle is burning. Oh yes, that is right. Well, anyways, he was so drunk that he fell fast asleep as soon as we got him to the room and I helped carry him over to his bed. So far my luck with the ghost was looking up for me. For some reason or another, they didn't make their presence known to us for some reason. The very next day, that changed. When Paul woke up the following morning, he had a big hangover and wasn't hungry. He did, however, want water and some coffee. It wasn't until noon that he was ready to eat lunch, so I went into the kitchen and made some eggs and toast. As I was preparing his meal, I heard a loud scream from the kitchen table. I put the plate on the counter and rushed over to him. He explained to me that he was writing one of his poems and that his hand lost control of his own pen. The pen wrote out a message all by itself. I hurried and grabbed the paper and read it before he could get the chance. It seemed that it started to write out what was a warning, as it said, "Get out, now. He is going to." After reading, I panicked and crumpled the paper. He asked me what was going on, and I just suggested that maybe he was having some bad side effects from his hangover. Funny thing was that he bought it. This also presented another problem for me. I soon realized that if I was going to wait until Sunday to kill him, those ghosts might find other ways to warn him. I decided it was time to follow through on my plan. I told Paul no worries and that it would soon be time to start his therapy session. I excused myself and went and grabbed the tarantulas. He waited patiently for me to come back. When I told him to put on the Kevlar gloves and the welder's apron, Paul did as he was told. I pulled out one tarantula and he instantly freaked out. I reassured him and told him that in order to get over his fear, he needed to have direct contact with the very thing that he was afraid of. Paul was hesitant at first, and then he agreed. I had him sit at the kitchen table. I carefully walked over with the giant spider in my right hand. I, too, was wearing the same protective gear that he was. When I was close enough, I placed the spider into his right hand, and it slowly crawled over it. I warned him that if he panicked, the spider would as well. It took maybe about an hour and a half of me coaching him and convincing him that he would be okay. I figured after that amount of time had passed, he would eventually get over his fear. To think of it all, I was just bullshitting him all this time, but I started to think that I was believing it myself. Joe shot another one of those stupid, wicked grins at Carol. Carol couldn't help but look away from him. She hated his face so much. Carol turned and looked at the candle that looked like it was burnt halfway. Joe let out a small cough to get Carol's attention. She turned and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just got distracted. Please continue." Joe eagerly continued, "Very well, I will, my dear." Carol felt a shudder when Joe called her that. Things went well, you see, because it worked out for Paul and he seemed happy about his results. Paul then told me that he had enough and that he was feeling very tired. The excitement and the nerves all in one had worn him out. I allowed him to excuse himself to his bedroom for rest. I told him to be back by 9 p.m. for some dinner and dessert. He agreed and headed off to bed. At this time I made my moves. I worked hard in the kitchen and I made a huge meal. You see, even though my servants were all gone, I still knew a thing or two about cooking and baking. I knew they would never approve of my special ingredients. I made shrimp and Alfredo pasta with a big salad and a slice of bread. For dessert, I made a big apple pie and I added my ingredients inside of it. I was delighted about my meal that I whipped up for him. I just couldn't wait to finally see his reaction. When it was finished, I placed everything in a container at least till dinner time, so when 9 p.m. rolled around, Paul still hadn't left his room just yet, so I decided to go and wake him up. As I was about to head up there, I saw Paul make his way to the kitchen. He looked like he had rested well, and he claimed that he was starving. I walked over and patted him on the back. I invited him to the dinner table. Paul made his way up to the table and took a seat. He was curious as to why I wasn't joining him for dinner, and I told him that I already ate dinner. I told him that I just wasn't very hungry at the moment, but I sat across from him at the table and watched him eat. Once he was done, I urged him to try a piece of pie that I had on a silver platter, that I slid it right over to him. I made sure that I cut the pie into equal pieces, and to remove a piece, I wanted it to appear that I had already had one prior. I didn't want to give him any suspicion. I also told him that it was apple pie. Paul told me that that was his favorite, and grabbed a piece off the platter without any hesitation. As I was watching intently, he chewed his food. Not long after, Paul's expression of pure enjoyment of the first bite soon turned to utter confusion. I could tell that he was now hearing a loud crunching noise as he chewed his food. Paul focused towards me, and then he looked at his fork. He soon realized that he was eating pieces mashed up black widows. Before Joe could continue on, Sam interjected. "Dude, what the fuck? That is absolutely disgusting." Joe just looked at Sam and said, "What do you think? I'm a pure-blooded psychopath." Carol was just face-palming herself. "Well, okay, whatever, just get on with it." Joe nodded and continued. The moment Paul realized what he was eating, he tried spitting it out. However, I was filled with excitement at this point. I hurried and reached my hand right across his mouth and covered it lightly. I told him to finish chewing it up, but he shook his head violently. I grabbed a knife that was laying on the table with my left hand and told him to do it or I'd stab him in the side of the head. Paul stopped resisting and started to chew on his food. He gagged on what I made for him. I still held my hand right over his mouth as he was gagging. Paul was soon gagging to the point that he started to choke. Once I realized that he needed help, I just kept my hand over his face, which turned blue. Paul tried to reach his right hand out to me as if to say, "Please help me." Yet I ignored him, and he eventually stopped breathing and fell to the floor. Once I knew he was dead for sure, I took off all his clothes and I burned them in my backyard as part of a bonfire I constructed. I also hauled Paul's carcass to the pig pen. I figured it had been a while since they had a nice meal, other than just pig slop. I made my way back to the kitchen table and grabbed the pie and threw it away in the trash. The 2 tarantulas that I bought earlier, I decided to just rip their legs off, one by one, while wearing the Kevlar gloves, and then I chopped their bodies up and flushed them down the toilet. But a little bit at a time. I did really hate spiders, you see. I still put myself through it to make it worth the end. Oh well, anyways, I cleaned up all the evidence as I always did. Once doing that, I finished the night out with a hot shower and a nightcap before bed. I was going to need my sleep for the next day's true task, which ended up consisting of taking Paul's remains and letting my dogs have the rest for scraps. You see, I barely feed my animals like that. I usually made sure they were good with their diets in order to truly help dispose of remains. It always helped to keep them at least 3 days with no food, so human remains were a delicate treat for them. I can say this though, I did sleep like a baby that night. However, when I did fall asleep, I had a nightmare unlike any other in my entire life. One I'd never ever forget. Okay, Slash-a-Holics, this has been Chapter 8 of Murder Report by James Acosta. I enjoyed the psychopathy of this chapter with Sloppy Joe, but as an arachnophobic myself, it was a little... kind of felt some creepy crawlies while I was trying to narrate. But fun chapter. Love that he took the guy's fear and made that his death. That was really good. I like that we're getting more into the supernatural aspect of everything to the point he's lost his entire cleaning crew, all of his employees at home. The lengths he goes through to commit a kill, that's fun. And I'm curious to see what the ghosts do next. You know, it's kind of fun seeing a psychopathic killer getting high constantly. That was fun. But yeah, this was a fun chapter. If you enjoyed the chapter, let James know in the comments below what you thought. He loves to hear from all of you as much as I do. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, click the like button, and click the bell so you always know when new narrations are dropping. And just a little update for those who didn't see the post on the channel. Both of my books are now available in print, in paperback and hardback, and ebook on Amazon. The link and information is in the pinned comments and the description below. You've seen it on the screen, Quarantine and Celestial Slumber. And also, before I go, Slash-a-Holics, if you've ever wanted to help support the channel, now would be a great time. You can become a member of the channel through YouTube, clicking the join button below the video, or you can join our Patreon. You can even do a one-time donation through PayPal or Cash App. All the information is in the pinned comments and description below. But alright, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening. Be excellent to each other, and remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it.
Midnight calls out threaded in black. Sound of whispers, no turning back. The 80s slasher library reads. Echoes of terror sown into the seas. Calling all slash-a-holics unite. Under moon's cruel waxy light. Jason, Freddy, Michael run free. Chucky's laughter haunting me. Leather pages bound in grime. Out of print, blood frozen in time. Voices crawling from the past. Every chapter a scream that lasts. Calling all slash-a-holics unite. Under moon's cruel waxy light. Jason, Freddy, Michael run free. Chucky's laughter haunting me. Leather pages bound in grime. Out of brick, blood frozen in time. Voices calling from the past. Every chapter a scream that lasts. Each tale turns razor sharp. His voice strings you like a harp. Silent screams behind locked doors. Librarian knows you're craving more. Fingers clutch at well-worn spines. Bleeding thought through shadow lines. Out of print but never out of mind. He's laughter haunting me. Leather pages, bound in crime, out of print, blood frozen in time. Voices crawling from the past, every chapter a scream that laughs. In me, in me, in me. It's been enough. In me.
Each tale turns razor sharp. His voice strings you like a harp. Silence screams behind locked doors. Librarian knows you're craving more.
Fingers clutch at well-worn spines, bleeding thought to shadowed lines. Out of print but never out of mind, he reads the fears you'll always find.